Hello, this is Danny from CG Dreams. We're now in part 5, and in part 5 we're going to be dealing with binding the skeleton to the geometry. This is known as weighting. We're going to be going through all the procedure of this, as well as showing how we can tweak it and make it look better. We're now in part 5, and in part 5 we're going to bind the bee mesh to the rig. In order to do this, the first thing we need to do is obviously make sure that the bee is visible. So in our layers we should be able to turn the meshes on if it's turned off. We do not need to see the controllers at this stage, but it's handy to be able to see the joints. I'm going to select the mesh of one of the wings, and then I'm going to select the polygons of the wings, but only one at a time. Now I'm going to select the joint that belongs to the wings, and then go over to the browser and press S, so I know exactly what it is I've got to select. So that selects the object again. And now hold the shift key and select the middle mouse button, all of the joints. With that we're going to click on bind. The bind can be found in the character menu, but I'm going to do it from here. When you do this and you select the geometry, you should see that it's got a skin object, skin tag put inside of the wing, and that we got a weighting tag. Now if we press the weighting tag, click it twice with the shift key held down, you should see this pop up, which is the weight manager, and you should also see that it's got a varied of colour of weighting going all the way through the wing. This is what we want to see. This looks really good. For the second wing we'll do something slightly different. We're going to select the weight tag, which you can see only contains the left wing joints. We're going to just turn on the lock here to lock that in place, and we're going to drag and drop the right small wings in there. There they are. Middle mouse click and drop them in there, and you'll see why in a minute. When we do this, we'll just select our left small wing for the moment. When we do this and you double click on the weighting tag and go into the joints, you'll see here a list of joints, and it's in this list of joints that are going to show up because of what is inside the weighting tag. So this weighting tag here, what's shown here, is what's going to show here. Being as we've already weighted one side, we just need to go to the other side, double click on the geometry, we're going to select all of the right wing, you see there, go to auto weight, make sure selected points is on, and click calculate, and then what this will do is it will bind the wings. And that should be the result. I'm going to do exactly the same for the other wings, but I'm going to go into a time lapse because it's the same procedure. The next part that we're going to set the weighting for will be our main body. We're going to do this separately as well. Apart from, we don't need to select the polygons for this. We can select the head as well to do this, but you can see here that there's other objects that are actually part of the head. So we need to be careful how we go about this. This is why I'm going to select this, and I'm going to select just the bone that's needed for this. This is going to make things far more easier for us. So it's the thorax and the thorax bone, and there it is. So I'm going to hold down the control key so that both of these are selected. If your body is all in one, you will have to select multiple objects. So you can go ahead and select, say for instance, if you select the thorax and it's part of the abdomen, you can select that as long as you select the bones that belong to the abdomen as well. So in other words, if when you select your B thorax, the abdomen is also selected, select those bones for the abdomen simultaneously. In my particular case, my thorax is separate, so I'm going to do that separate. I'm going to click on bind, and now when I select the thorax, geometry, to select that, you should have the full weighting that's assigned to there. Now we're going to do the weighting for the abdomen. Now when I select the abdomen, you'll see here that it's also got the legs simultaneously as part of the mesh. So that means that I'm going to select all of the abdomen joints as well as all the leg joints. So the easiest way for me to be doing this is, first of all, type in abdomen, ABDO is enough, and we can select on these, that's no problem. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select and type in leg. That's all I need, and we're going to hold down the shift key, middle mouse click on all the joints that have come up. We can clear that now, and now we will have the abdomen joints and all the joints for all the legs simultaneously selected. Then all we have to do now is hold down the shift key and click on the abdomen to select that, and then click on bind. So you can see here that the binding has got some problems for the weighting, but that is not a huge issue because we will be going through this and sorting all of this out. But the main thing is at the moment is when we go to double click on our weighting tag, you'll see here that we have all of the joints that are needed to fix any problems that we may have. To fix the problems with this to start with regarding the abdomen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of the abdomen parts by polygon selection. I'm going to go up here, well in fact I don't have to go up there because we've already got it inside here, and we can just type in ABDO, all the abdomen joints, and then when we go to the auto weighting, as long as you've got selected points, you'll be able to click on this and it will fix that problem. Now when you select these joints, you're going to have everything weighted as it should be, and the best way to test that is to select our controller and just start to move things. A little bit of smoothing, extra smoothing can be done on this. We'll do that later on, but for the most part that's not bad. Now we'll just quickly check and see how well the legs were auto weighted. And there's always some room for improvement, but we can do that again a little bit later on. You can see for the most part it's actually not done a bad job at all. We'll reset the transforms. I want you to go through all of these, spend a little bit more time than what I'm showing you, and just look at each area where the joint is there and there, and just take note of how it looks, and go for all of the legs. Also go for all of the controllers. As we were going through the rigging stage, I showed you two ways in which you can position the pole for the claw controller. One of those ways was to use a clamp, but I'll give you the other option, which was simply just to move this inside the controller for the claw. So as it stands, if you did use the clamp, it may look something like this, where you've got the pole for the claw just in the main foot controller, which is this one here highlighted, and then you may have applied a clamp constraint. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I found that during my testing that the clamp really wasn't working for me. It really wasn't doing a smooth job. So the way to change this is simply to go to the clamp constraint that was added, remove it, and then drag this pole into the hierarchy of the claw controller, which is there. You can see here, left claw controller. So that's the controller just going down there. You can see it's selected, and then the pole is inside. By doing this, I found that I'm actually getting a much more better and smoother movement with that. So I went ahead and did that to all of them, and you can see here now that the binded version of our rig really does move a lot more smoother with that in place. So that is why I opted for doing things that way. Now let's move on to weighting some other aspects of this. We're going to go for the head this time. The head is going to be controlling for all of the mandible, all of the tongue area, and the antennae. So these are all the joints that must be selected. So in order to do this, we need to select all of these joints. The easiest way for us to do that is to go and locate the joints for the head, because we know all those joints are going to be within there, and that's going to be found within the thorax set of bones, and there they all are. So we're going to select the head, all of these. Middle mouse clicking should select everything in there. We're going to select the head geometry and then bind. Double clicking on this will show what it's done, and then we can go in there and do some fixing a little bit later on, which we will most certainly be needing to do. What I will do off the bat is I will select the head and fix this one straight away. We're going to select the simple eyes as well. Note that you need to make sure that when you are selecting that you've got your soft selection turned off, otherwise it will affect how it will be applied for the weighting. With that selected, I'm going to select the head, go to auto weight and then calculate, and then everything should turn one single solid colour. Now we've got the basic weighting done as far as binding the mesh to the joints. Now it's time to go in a little bit closer and examine how well these meshes are deforming. Just because we may be setting up a automatic weighting, which is what we've done so far, it doesn't mean that everything's going to deform correctly. This is why we need to learn some techniques of the weighting manager and the weight painting tool so that we can refine it to get it to articulate properly at the proper location and the proper way in which the joint should be bending. To demonstrate some of these techniques, I'm going to first show you in a more simple scene, and then we can apply it to our bee. I'm going to be demonstrating what I need to be showing here on the left back leg by itself in a scene to make it more easier to understand what I'm doing. This has got the root to the leg, which is simulating selecting this controller and moving the whole body up and down. You can see how it's bending at the legs, and that is what this is simulating here. It goes without saying that you want to select your controllers and freeze all. That's something you always want to do. And while you've got those controllers selected, it'd be good for you to start with adding a keyframe so we can start to manipulate this leg here to see at its extreme ranges how it deforms. And to do this, I'm going to first work on this area at the top here, and I'm going to add a keyframe between 0 and 5, and I'm going to move it down quite low, set a keyframe, and then number 10 I'm going to move it quite high to the point where it's starting to drag the claw. At 15 I'm going to move it to a point where it's quite forward and set that key. I'm also going to be moving manually this controller here, which is obviously our pole. When it goes to 15, this needs to be moved. So at 14 I'm just going to set a keyframe to leave it where it is, and then number 15 it needs to change like that. Keep it central. It's a very big, just a very simple piece of animation. And then to finish off, I'm going to select the first key, hold down the control key and drag it to frame number 20 so it brings everything back to its original state. Now at the moment I've got this pole selected here. I need to do exactly the same thing for this. We're going to select control, I'm going to drag that to frame number 20 so everything goes back to its default location. Now they'll just play that back quickly. You can see there it's going through the motions of that particular part, and that finishes at frame number 20. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to start at frame 25. I'm going to select this controller, keyframe it, go to keyframe 30, pull it to a more extreme pose, set a key, go to 35, set a key, and then I'm going to select key number 25 and then hold down the control key and put it on 40 so that it starts the same and ends the same by the time we get to here. 45, I'm going to be keying just this controller, so just before 45 I'm going to make sure that there's no movement there for that controller, which there isn't, which is good. So 44 I'm going to set, well, we'll stick to 45, 5 frame increments, and then at frame 50 I'm going to go all the way to that side. 55 I'm going to go all the way to the other side. I think you get the idea of this. And at frame 45 I'm going to hold down the control key and drag it to the next 5 increment. So on 60 it's going to go back to where it was. So you've got yourself this little test set up there for the knee and the legs and all of the positions of the rig. 65 I'm going to be working down here. I'm going to select this, set a keyframe, 70. I'm going to just crush it up a little bit, 75. I'm going to pull it down here, and 80. I'm going to get the 65 and drag it to 80. And then last but not least, on frame 85, I'm going to rotate this so that we can rotate the FK of the claw, keyframe that fully out and fully down to see how that functions. For this particular case, I increased my frame range to 95 frames so that I can make sure everything was 5 frame increments, so I can kind of quickly go to those. And just at the end here, you just got that claw going out and fully back down again. And this is a setup that's going to be useful for how we deal with the weighting of the 3 legs that we will be weighting or tweaking the weighting for our bee. We only need to do one side of this. That's all we need to do. So let's start right at the beginning here. We're going to go to the first key, which is going to show us how things deform at this end more than anything. I'm going to go to my options or display and make sure I've got the lines turned on so I can see how things are deforming. As you can see, it's actually deforming really well. What I'm looking for is I'm looking for this area here to not be deformed too much. That's really, really important that that's not the case. We don't want that to be happening. Let's have a look and see what's happening underneath here. Everything looks good. We're going to go to here. There's no bad deformation here, although I am pushing it to quite an extreme, but I can see here that it's doing quite well. Let's go to here, and again it's doing quite well. Again here, all the way through here, it seems to be doing quite well. Now we're going to move to the next key, and we can see here that we've got some bad deformation just here. So this is where we can start to sort some things out. Now the way I like to do this is I like to expand the geometry, which is here, and you'll see this weight tag. I'm going to double click on the weight tag, and then you'll see here that we've got this color going throughout the whole of the mesh. This is depicting how the weighting is graduating between one joint to the next and to the next, and you can see here it's got some kind of smoothness applied automatically, but it may not be applying enough for us. Now when we double click on this weight tag, it automatically loads the weighting tools, and this weighting tool is actually a brush based weighting, which means that you can paint the weights to be more smooth, as an example here. The mode here is the type of brush that you're going to be using for your weighting. So absolute means it's going to apply the absolute weight strength that you've got in here. So in other words, if it's on 100% and you start to paint, it will be applying 100% weight of that joint that you've selected to the vertices that you're painting. For this reason, when you want to kind of work in a more streamlined gradual process, what you do is you hover your mouse, your paintbrush, over certain points that have got issues, and you'll see here that you've got the joint which is closest to it and the joint that's after it. So the joint I'm on right now is the trochanter. This one here, you see that is the coxa. Then you've got the trochanter. You can see the hierarchy there, and then not the trochanter, the trochanter. And then when you move down to here, you can see here that we've got the femur. Now what we're looking at is the percentage of weight that's been applied. So you can see here that 98.69% on this particular vertex has been applied as a weight to this, just to this vertex. You can see here that when we move up to another vertex that you're going to get a different reading for a different joint. Now in order to select particular joints, you can right click anywhere within the area and you're going to be given a selection of joints that you can choose. Okay, so let's say for instance we're working on this area here. This is obvious that this is an area we need to work on, and all's good there. You've got to click in the right area when you're doing this. There's our joints, and you can choose what joints are going to be visible. So for instance, we right click, this is going to be our femur, and then when we select that, only the femur is going to be selected for us. Now we can right click again. We want, say for instance, the trochanter and the femur. Okay, it should allow us to have both when you click on all joints. It just allows you to isolate where you are with things. Now the first thing I would probably want to do is go to the smooth, because this is normally the first thing that is kind of the first call of action to try to smooth out some areas that are not looking so good. So this is something that you would most likely do to start with. Now if you can't get to the points because they've been obscured, this is kind of why we put this animation down, because you can back out the animation a little bit just by a couple of frames, and then that should be enough to kind of unwrap the area where you've got problems, which was incidentally here through here. So I can move it on one extra frame on. Things are looking okay there. If you middle mouse button and drag to the right, you can increase the radius, and if you middle mouse button and go up and down, you can increase or decrease the strength. So I'm going to smooth this area out a little bit here, and then I'm going to move it closer to the frame where the problem is, and because we've done a little bit of smoothing on the previous frame, you can see here that it's given us the chance to go back in there and actually see where those bad deformations were and get to those vertices. You've got to be careful when you're doing this. You don't make too many changes, so it kind of goes away from what you're trying to achieve. When you're trying to create a balanced smooth area here, you want to kind of work on the smoothing the polygons or vertices, shall I say, that are in between the last loop and this loop, so that it can smooth out the differences between them. You can see there. This is where having enough spans, loop slices in your mesh come into its own. This is where it can have the ability to retain some volume. So then when you've done that, you can go back and you can just have a quick look and see what's happening with that in that string pose. And of course you can go down and you can repair all of these down through here. So the first port of call would be to make sure that your weighting is good in the first place, and I mean your automatic weighting. And then the second port of call would be to do some smoothing. And then the third level from doing this is to use a feature, a deformer called Delta Mush, which smooths things out even further. And even if that doesn't work very well, then you can move on to the stage where you do corrective morphs. So you get the absolute perfect deformation, but you need to really work on your weighting to get the best out of that first. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just smoothing this down. making the most of the spans that I've got in there. And it's good to work just beyond the norm of the range that you're going to be animating in. Just push it a little bit beyond the norm, which is what I've done here. It's quite stretched out, and then we can smooth it out, and that is way more better than it was before. Remembering that we only have to do this once to this leg. Looking down the mesh, I can see there's no other problems there whatsoever. So we've dealt with that. Then we can move on to the next frame, like here. Have a look at that, see if there's any bad deformation. I think we're all good to go. Go to the next one. I believe by 20 it reverted back to the beginning. Now 25 onwards we're working on a different type of deformation. And just work your way going through this so that you get a really smooth deformation. Go for each frame at a time. And remember to go back the previous frame to make sure that some of the new smoothing that you've applied hasn't altered anything with a new range that you've put it into. So I'm looking here, there's nothing bad down here. And then we go on to 40, 45. We're looking at how things twist. Spend your time with it. I can see here that frame 70, we've got some issues down here. Just right click in on the joint to select that joint area, and before you know it, we're starting to balance out that deformation that we've got in there. So that's already much better. Let's look at these. If you find you've gone too far with the smoothing, you can go back to the absolute mode and just hover over there, and you'll see how much percentage has been applied there. So we're working on this area here, and this is the bacid tartarus, and it says here that it's a 71%. So if we go straight to 71% and start to apply over here, you're not going to get this sudden crazy deformation going on. You need to increase it just beyond what it was at, just so that you can pull it back out to where it should belong. See that? Just be careful what you apply it to and how you apply it. Now in this particular instance, I need to go back because I can see that there's a certain selection of polygons that I really need to apply it to. So let's go back and smooth this out again, and then we're going to make the most of the ability to select some polygons. So I'm going to go down here, U then L for loop select, and then U and Y to expand that, and that's going to select some polygons right at the bottom there. Now I want to go and invert this, so U and I will invert that. It's just one way that you can do this, and then I'm just going to hold down the control key just to select a few polygons away from there that I don't want to affect. I think even to that point we can leave that as it is. And now when we go back to using our tools, our weighting tools, we're going to click on selected only, and then when we go back there and go to absolute mode, we start applying this, it's not going to affect anything beyond that point in which we've selected. You see there? We're gradually getting to all of these points, and we're putting them back to a different level. We go back to smoothing again to smooth that out, maybe take the strength down a little bit, and then rework on that area again, because there's a little bit too much deformation going on in some areas. And then let's move on to at the end here. I don't want selected only now. I'm going to smooth out this a little bit more. And then we can start working our way down. And I know that when we get to the end, let's go to the end here, frame 90. You can see here there's some bad deformation going on down there. Rather than smooth this out, I'm going to fix it with the weight manager and select all of these joints, also select all of these polygons, and I'll go to the tarsus bone that belongs in that area, go to commands, and then apply selected absolute 100%, and it's going to fill that 100%. And what happens as a result of that is when we go to rotate the joints for the claw there, what it will do is it will give us, let's see if we can, it will give us a perfect rotation there. See that? Because there's not supposed to be any deformation there. So you can either make sure you've added the correct amount of weight to the claw end, or you can select all of the polygons to the previous part of the geometry, which was this, and then apply 100% to the bone that it belongs to. And remember, that is done in the weight manager by double clicking with the shift key held down. It brings it up, and then you can see the bones as you click through them, what they are affecting and what they're not affecting, and how much by as well. And we wanted 100% on there. It may be the case that you may want to select that and the previous bone and do a little bit of smoothing between the two if the deformation's too harsh when you're kind of like doing deforming. So that is how you would go about setting that up. So what about if you wanted it to be even more smoother and you wanted kind of more of a quick fix to add to addition to your weighting where it hasn't been successful? Well, this is where it comes to using the Delta Mush deformer. So the next port of call for you, if you haven't got the desired results from just weighting alone, is to use a deformer called Delta Mush. Now, a bit of history on the Delta Mush. Delta Mush was something that was found in Maya. It was made for Maya many years ago, and it was a plugin that works on the basis of being very intelligent and smart and help to smooth out the deformation between each joint, and it's really clever in the way that it works. Eventually it became a plugin for sale for Cinema 4D. It was a purchased plugin, which I jumped on that as soon as I saw that it was available, and then eventually it was implemented directly within Cinema 4D, and then this is what we have now. Now you notice on the geometry that we've already got a deformer, this skin deformer that works with the weight tag, and the deformer, the Delta Mush, is also going to be a deformer. So we need to make sure that the Delta Mush is placed after the skin deformer. It works along with this skinning of the mesh, not in replace of it. So to do this, we select the mesh, we go to the deformers with the shift key held down, and then select Delta Mush. Now right away it's going to be working. You'll soon know this when you click on the smooth view, but I'm going to click on initialize. The initialize will take a snapshot of how it currently is, and then when we go to smooth it out, it will work out what it needs to do to make it smooth. Now if you didn't want to use the initialize, you can use iterations for it to work out. So if you click on release, you could use the iterations instead. So if I was to increase this, you'll start to see it doing its magic. Get a little bit closer, give it a bit of smoothness, and you see the iterations of its calculation. Now I quite like to use the initialize. You can use either, and something that, okay, initialize, and then we're going to use a little tiny bit of smoothing, just a little bit. Now you may find that the smoothing is great on some areas, but there's other areas that you really don't want it on, and to get around this we can create a vertex map for this. To create that vertex map, all we have to do is select the mesh, go over to the left hand side in your standard layout, click on this little brush, and it puts you into vertex painting mode. Now if you go to, I think it's on absolute by default, we will soon see, absolute, click on apply all. This means that when it's yellow, the 100% of what the delta mush is going to be doing will be applied. Now if we were to then go to subtract and start to paint on areas that we don't want it to affect, you'll see that we've got fine control over where the delta mush is going to be working and when it's not going to be working. So primarily through the middle of the hair, I really don't want it to be working. I will deal with that other bit in a minute. Using the middle mouse button to change the size, and middle mouse button up and down to change the opacity. I want to select the polygons of this area here because I don't really want it to be affected by delta mush at all, and then I'm going to double click on my vertex tag there and then click on absolute and then apply selected. Maybe it will subtract it. Yeah, subtract, that's the one I wanted. There we go. And then what we can do is we can go to our smoothing and smooth that out, but I'm not going to just yet because I want to show you that this is working. We go to our delta mush, and inside fields we can drag and drop this vertex map into there, and then I'm going to go back to the delta mush and I'm going to increase its setting here to be quite extreme so that you can see where it's working and where it's not with this vertex map. You see here, as I'm painting the vertex map, in this particular case I'm subtracting where I want this to work. You can see there that it's having less effect. You can see around here. Now I may want to go back in there and then click on absolute, clean up some areas. Or when I've done that, I may want to go to smooth and then click on apply all a couple of times, and then it will smooth that out. So you've got all of these options in here at your disposal. For the delta mush with vertex map painting, and the result of this is that we've got really nice deformation. Now if that doesn't work and you wanted even more refined deformation, we can move on to the next level, which would be to apply some correctional morphs. The next line of getting a better deformation is to use a correctional morph, a PSD morph as it's called. The difference with this particular type of correction is that it enables you to sculpt in or smooth down with a brush the way that you want the geometry to be at a certain position in which it's being posed by the joints. So what I've done here is I've gone from 0 to 5, and then we can look for an area that needs to be a better deformation, as an example here. Let's say 5, frame 5, and then at this position we're going to select the geometry, right click, and we're going to go to the rigging and click on pose morph. We're going to enable the points mode because it's points mode that's going to be deformed, and then where it says mixing we're going to select correctional PSD. That's all you have to do. Now we're going to go to the mesh menu and select the brushes and then just pull that off. I'm going to click on the grab brush, and I'm going to do something quite extreme just so you can see this. I'm going to make it as if this was a muscle down here, and you'll notice that as soon as you start to do any movement, it will automatically highlight the bone that's responsible to trigger off this movement. If I wanted to create a bit of movement in this particular joint, between the mesh and the joint, I just click on the mesh and this joint becomes illuminated as well. Now I've kind of gone about it in a way that it's creating muscles just to demonstrate this. This would be like a bicep pose, but you can use it just to correct some deformation that should look different when it's in this particular pose. So as an example here, I'm going to just move that up like that. I can even use the smooth brush to smooth things down, or hold down the shift key to smooth down. Once you've done this, all you have to do then is basically go back to your pose morph, rename it to whatever you want. In our particular case it would be ideal if you've done like left back leg. Give it a description. Then go to animate. You don't need to touch anything at this stage because it will be automatic. Now you notice that when the leg's stretched out, you see here that it's gone quite flat. And then when we go back to frame 25, you see here that it bulges out. Now you've got this here to alter, make some alterations with this and how it responds. And how it blends as to whether it's the position that's changed or the twisting. So if you find it's not quite working the way you would like it, you can adjust these. See, in this particular case it's not really making any difference to this. We go back to here where it's 5, frame 5, we know it should be 100% in that position. There's nothing here that's really altering it in this particular case. Let's just go through. You can see here that these correctional controls are automatically being applied for us as it goes through those motions. So between the weighting, the delta mush, and then the post morphs, the PSD morphs, post space deformations, you can really get the ultimate deformation on your character. We're now going to look at the deformation of the thorax and the abdomen to see how that's performing. I'm going to select the IK for the abdomen. I'm just going to bend it to see how that looks. I can see here that it could do with a little bit more smoothing. Everywhere else seems to be quite good in the way that it's been working. I'm going to select this mesh. double click on the weight tag, and it's this joint in particular that I want to work on a little bit. I'm going to go to the commands and I'm going to apply smooth and click apply. Now I could select all of them at once, but I really want to keep an eye on each individual one. I'm going to select the mesh area just for that and then click apply selected. Do that a couple of times. I'm not going to double click on this weight tag without the shift key enabled, and I'm going to go to smooth. I'm going to do some manual smoothing in there. I'm now going to select the IK tag and I'm going to pull it up straight. I'm just going to push it a little bit beyond its normal boundaries. So we could do with this area here, moving a little bit with the thorax. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the thorax for the moment. I'm going to hide it, select the abdomen, and I'm going to select these 4 central polygons and then press U key and I key to expand that selection. I'm going to alt click to remove some of that selection and shift key to add to the selection. I'm now going to bring back the thorax and see where that selection interacts with the other part of the thorax. I'm going to shrink that selection ever so slightly. U and K will do that. I think that will be enough for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the joint here to this selection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this weight tag here. Now I understand what it is I've got to do. And in the weight tag there will be a list of joints. I'm going to search for thorax. I'm going to drag and drop that into the joints list. Now I've done this, I can select the abdomen. I've already got that selection already selected, and when I select that abdomen and double click on it, you'll notice that we've now got the thorax joint inside here. So I'm going to select that thorax joint, go to commands, click absolute, and I'm going to apply 50%. I'm going to go to the polygon mode and click on apply selected. You'll notice that now some of this is bound to the thorax joint, which is what I wanted. I'm now going to increase that selection, U and Y, a few times. Go back to my weight in the commands, and this time I'm going to select smooth. I'm going to click on apply selected several times. That's much more better. I'm going to do exactly the same thing for the thorax as I did the abdomen. Start to type in abdomen and add abdomen 0 to there. And now when we go to the thorax geometry, shift double click, go to joints, and we've had this thorax typed in there, that's why we couldn't see it. I'm now going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to select the abdomen, I'm going to decrease its, get rid of its visibility. Select the thorax, U and L, UI, UI, UI to increase that selection. I'm going to select the abdomen, joint 0, go to commands, and we're going to add absolute 50% and apply selected. And then I'm going to increase that selection, UI, a few times, and then I'm going to go to smooth, and we're going to apply 100% smooth. And now the deformation is going to be nice and smooth between those two joint points. Select that and then reset. Now we need to go down to the other aspects of this, such as here, and test these, such as the mandible. And they're weighted absolutely fine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to eliminate each part of the head that I've done, and it's working fine. So the head and the simple eyes, the mandible, we can go to the selection and then hide selected. This is going to enable us to know what we need to work on next. Let's select the antennae. I have a feeling that this is going to be fine by the auto weighting. Let's have a look at the ball joint. That's not deformed or anything like that, so that's great. So I'm going to work through the mouth like that. I'm sure I'm going to come across some areas that are going to need some attention. Being that these antennae are not in my way, I can just move down to the mouth area, and then we're going to work on these individually. As you can see here, it may not be the case that they're all going to function as I would expect. So I'm going to start with this controller. I know that this, you see that it's not fully been applied to the geometry correctly. I'm going to select the geometry that is applying to these particular joints. It's the glossar joints. It's all selected. We're going to go to auto weighting, and we're going to go by selected points and then click calculate. I'm now going to go into a time lapse where I select each individual piece of geometry, the corresponding joints, and then applying the same method by applying it to selection. And the result of this is now we've got a fully functional mouth area with everything weighted and applied correctly. And in the next video we're going to be finishing up with going into something a little bit more deeper with custom sliders using user data, and we're going to be using a little bit of espresso. And then we're going to finally complete this with one more video to do a small animation. If you like my content and have learned something from it, please give a thumbs up and subscribe. I'm not monetizing my content, it's for free, made for you in my own free time. So please give me some support back by hitting that thumbs up and subscribing. The next part of this video tutorial will be up very soon, and we will continue where we left off. So stay tuned.